Hey, everybody. This is Aaron Harris, host of the Football Odyssey, and today I want to talk to you about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free, and there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So go and download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Football Odyssey. This is your host, Aaron Harris. On today's episode, I'm pleased to welcome John McKeon, the CEO of American Football International. After completing his college football career, John pursued opportunities playing American football overseas that would kickstart his fascination with American football's global potential. John discusses his experience launching AFI, the appeal of American football abroad, and his insights on the growth and success of the sport's international endeavors. If you want to learn more about AFI and international football, I've attached the link to the AFI website and their social handles, and I strongly recommend you check it out and see what American football is like all over the world. If you enjoy the episode, subscribe and share, and let me know what you think on Twitter and Instagram. As always, thank you for listening, and now enjoy the show. Okay, John McKeon, CEO of American Football International. How are you, John?
Hey, Aaron, how's it going?
Going well, man. Do you have a typical workday?
As it comes to AFI, it's kind of a little bit all over the place. I mean, right now it's with football happening all over the world in different places, and my team kind of being all over the world. It's really the moments I can steal throughout the day and the evenings. I have two young kids and my wife, and trying to manage your family and your businesses is a lot to do. So I wouldn't say days typical. I try to to just find time in the day where I can sneak in, blocks of time to get AFI done, as well as everything else I got going on.
What was the experience like during COVID when a lot of leagues and teams were kind of disbanded for the 2020 season? Like, how did you kind of approach filling the website with content?
I mean, at first, I think just the news of how COVID was affecting each league, and there's not necessarily like a unified communications platform for a lot of these teams and leagues. So a lot of, outside of Facebook and Twitter or whatever, a lot of teams and players and coaches and other countries would find out about what was happening in each country as it regards to the leagues and the schedules from AFI. So initially, most of our content was just fixated around, what's cancellations, what leagues are trying to do to mitigate it, how it's affecting each country differently. And then how that then therefore impacted each league independently. As we got further into COVID and more leagues were canceled and football was few and far between, we started a series of Facebook videos, live streams that we broadcast. We had invited people on, and we just kind of initially it was about how COVID was affecting each country, because we have contacts obviously in China and Brazil and Mexico, all over Europe. And so COVID was being experienced differently in each one of the markets that we, have contacts and our team is in. So it's super interesting to find out like how each country was handling things differently, how each leagues were handling things differently, and the different approaches to COVID, response. And then football picked up again in Europe in August last year with Finland's league, and that's really when we kind of put our foot on the gas and started AFI TV, which has really taken off with the live streaming platform that we built, and the response has really been great. And it kind of gave us time to develop that and figure it out. So we really kind of accelerated during COVID, I would say.
Yeah, there's certain industries that were able to move forward without or not missing a beat, being able to adapt. So I think that's definitely a plus for you guys. And before we go deeper into AFI, can you give me a little bit about your background with football and how you developed a passion for the game and like what it was that drove you to it?
Yeah, so I used to play. I played in college at NC State, and then I played. Well, I would say I had a cup of coffee in the NFL back in 2006 with the Seattle Seahawks. After that, between injuries and the business of football, I bounced around to a few places. I played arena football a couple seasons after that, and then kind of found myself a little bit disillusioned with football, and a young man trying to figure out like what he's going to do after football is over. And kind of out of the blue, when I was in that period of my life, I got a call from a team in Finland, and I had not, I'm 22 years old and having no idea that there was Finland outside. There was football in Finland at that point, and I kind of, on a wing and a prayer, went over to play and didn't really expect much of it, and was really super pleasantly surprised by the passion and energy and interest in American football while I lived in Finland, and this was back in 2008. And from there, that opened my eyes up to the world of football outside the United States, which is a little bit larger and more, I guess, more robust than people realize in North America. And after that, I had a great season in Finland. Came back to the U.S. for a couple of months, and then immediately signed another contract with a team in Paris, France, and played another full season in Paris. It was part of like an international. The club I was on, La Flash de la Courneuve, was part of an international club tournament at the same time. So not only did I get to play all over France, but we were in this international tournament at the time called the Euro Bowl tournament, and played in. I went to Moscow. I went to Vienna. I went to Innsbruck, Austria, and we played teams from Germany and in Paris. And there was a lot of energy and seeing the sport in even those other further places. I just had more excitement around it. And then after that, I ended up coaching for a team in Italy for another season in 2010. It was a smaller club, a smaller experience, kind of, I was trying to figure out my way and what I was supposed to be doing. And at the time I realized that I didn't really want to coach, and I wanted to find out a way that I could kind of help support the growth of the game at a more macro level. And when I came back to the US and moved back to New York, I got a normal, quote unquote, normal job. But I was still really passionate, really interested about, what I experienced in Europe and what I saw there and what I knew the future of the sport could be. But there was no place on the internet to find anything. You couldn't go. It was very hard to find good information about what was happening outside the United States in the sport. And I just, basically taught myself how to build a website, taught myself a little web design, and just started writing on my own and, creating American Football International out of nothing. And then that's kind of like the root of it.
When you were playing in Finland and Paris, were you surprised at all at the talent level? I mean, obviously I wouldn't expect them to be as good as they are over here, but were you surprised at how good the talent level was, or do you think it was kind of what you expected when you went and signed up?
I mean, I honestly had no idea what to expect when I first went over there. It's hard to compare it to a U.S. team. I mean, a lot of people like to try to say it's the level of a D2 or D3, even at the top levels of some of these countries. But that doesn't, I don't think that, accurately represents the experience, because there's guys, I mean, first of all, you have a wide spectrum of ages on these teams, that guys that are, 18-year-olds, that would be playing in the high school in the US that are playing on men's senior teams. And then you have guys who are, 40 plus that have been playing on the team, 15, 20 years. And so I would say, from a talent perspective, it was almost like if you didn't have all these feeder systems and programs and money behind it in the US, what the US would have been. Because, what kind of brings me back to why I think football can be and eventually will be as popular as it is in the United States everywhere else is that, athletes are athletes no matter where you are and where you're located. It's kind of the money and the investment in the game and the media and the fans' interest in it, what kind of propels it or accelerates it or supports the kind of infrastructure that can support the programs that build the athletes in the US. And so, to make a long answer shorter, I thought the talent there was great. I was impressed that these guys knew as much as they knew, and I had no idea that they were there. Especially when you get to Paris and you have guys. I remember the guard next to me. I was a left tackle when they brought me in, and the guard who played right next to me, we called him Bam Bam. I mean, that's what the team called him, and he was a baggage handler at Charles de Gaulle Airport. And this guy, like 300 pounds, athletic, like but he was older than me at that point. So I would say he was probably in his early 30s. But like if someone had seen him and got their hands on him, he's 6'4", 300 pounds, smooth, super athletic guy. And somebody had seen him and got him into a program, 10 years, 15 years earlier, like this guy could have been playing in the NFL.
Yeah, like sometimes you'll hear about like certain NFL players that came from like Germany and things like that. And you always kind of think in the back of your mind, well, there must be there. But like once you actually watch a game and see how some of the talent and some of the gameplay is just really as good as you're going to find in the US at like some college levels, it's really eye opening, and it's like a wormhole that you kind of go into. And sometimes I kind of wonder, with like the NFL Europe or like the World League of American Football, did that have like some sort of influence on getting people really invigorated about the game and kind of dedicating their time to that, as opposed to maybe like some other sports that are popular in Europe?
Yeah, I think that the NFL being on TV and the accessibility to the sport in the U.S. at the top level really helps accelerate what these guys see as the potential of what they can reach, and also just general fan exposure to the rules of the game. I mean, American football is not the most simple, straightforward game to an outsider. And so the more exposure the general public outside the United States has to the game via TV, the internet, whatever, it's the learning curve is much less steep. And for players, I think the talent that, like the volume and of athletes and the competition that basically that you see in the U.S. that happens at the high school level and the college level, really, spurs on these high level athletes. Like when I was, I played at NC State, we had 100 guys on the team, and you're practicing 6 days a week, and you're in competition for your job every week. It's like, it's a very competitive thing for an 18-year-old kid to go into, and you really, I wouldn't say it's sink or swim, but most athletes, if you're bred that way, you're mentally bred that way, you kind of you rise to the challenge and you accept it. In a more laid back atmosphere where you're practicing only a couple times a week, and there's not really an emphasis for winning. There's not a ton of guys after your job. It's a more kind of like laissez-faire attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to spur that type of competition. And some programs in Europe do have that level of competition. They do have that amount of players on the team. There is that level of excitement, and I only see it growing since it's 2021. I mean, I played in Europe 12 years ago. I see it only getting more and more competitive, and the athletes getting better and better. So yeah, I think that the future is really bright for athletes and the level of play outside the country.
So when you started AFI, did you always intend for it to be kind of like a news resource for American football around the world, or was this kind of you maybe blogging about your experience and some of your thoughts about what the sport could be around the globe?
I mean, while I was overseas, I did write. I had like a little personal blog that I wrote about my experiences over there. That was just me being, trying to keep track of what was happening in my life and sharing it with my friends and family. I mean, this is like Blogspot, like 2008. I mean, it's just amazing how far we've come and what was out there at the time,
Right.
you know. But yeah, I mean, I would say the AFI, I was like, there's got to be a place where, I would tell people I lived in Europe for 3 years and I played American football, and they would be like, "You played they thought I played soccer," and I was like, "No, like American football." Like, and North Americans would have no clue that there was football overseas, and I was like, "How is that possible?" That like, because I knew that every team had 2 or 3 imports was what they called us, and there was hundreds of club teams outside the U.S. I'm like, why is this not like a bigger story and more people know about this? A lot of it is because there was no access to any news or information, and I knew that we're a highlight media based culture, the American culture, and we loved a good article or a good video clip, and there was great plays and great football happening outside the U.S. but nowhere to find it. I mean, sometimes like teams would have their own websites and they do their own reporting or do their own press releases, and a lot of times it was in other languages, or it was piecemeal. It wasn't like aggregated or curated in a way that was friendly to the casual fan or the casual American fan who's not going to know who doesn't know who the Flash de la Cordova is, doesn't know who the Helsinki Roosters are, and needs a little bit more context behind it. So the idea was to get something started that would kind of report on what I knew best at the time and see where it took us. And yeah, that's kind of what the impetus. It was news and information to start, and really, it's kind of where it's gone is a result of the interest that I've seen from our users and our audience.
Yeah, well, one thing that I really like about your site is how, because you have every different country that has a presence in football somewhere. You split it up by continent, and then you have the countries within. And last week I was reading an article about like the girls in Morocco that want to start a football team, like a tackle football team. And then you go into Czechoslovakia and Poland, and you really have like this abundance of knowledge that every time I go on, I can like learn something new. And I think that's kind of lost in a lot of sports websites where I'm getting a lot of news, but I'm missing out on some of like the good journalism and human interest pieces that you don't find. And so the fact that I can find out about people in an entirely different culture that play a sport that I love, I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I have to give credit to my partner and our my partner Roger Kelly, who's a PR professional he lives in Sweden right now, but he was with the BC Lions, and I mean, he's like he is the man. I mean, I'm lucky that we ran into each other and that he had some interest in kind of what I had started with AFI. And I mean, he really is driving that voice and that interest, and then that our editorial team, which is like 6 guys that sit all over the world that are really passionate about the sport and these stories that you're like, even the Morocco and Spain, and these players and these stories are what drives a lot of whether you're a scout or a fan or recruiter, or whether you live in Poland or you went to college with the guy who's now playing in Poland, or you remember he lived in Hawaii. And I'm thinking about Ryan Tuasaso, who played in Poland last year and played at the University of Hawaii. Basically that team, Roger and the editorial team, really do a really great job on human interest pieces and sharing that story of international football with our audience.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, like, what were some of the growing pains for you while you were trying to get AFI off the ground?
Well, obviously, working, finding time, I think is always an issue. When you don't have, when you have an idea, you're not sure how you're going to make money on it, or if you're ever going to make money on it, or if it's a business, or if it's a hobby, or, I didn't really think about any of that when I started. I just thought, this is something I would want to read that didn't exist, so I'm going to make it, and then maybe other people will be interested. And then, it's not like we are we're a huge giant organization. We're still trying to figure things out every day. And the growing pains, I would say, have been just finding time and figuring out ways to figuring out the business. Me personally, I'm not a digital media professional. Like I didn't know the first thing. That's not my background, and I have a business and finance background, so I feel like I know how to run a business. But the technical side of it, you end up being the CFO, the CTO, the chief marketing officer, the recruiter. Like, you basically do everything, and trying to learn all those different roles, on nights and weekends. And also, that's a tough thing. And then figuring out how to make this as a sustainable practice while also keeping our mission of benefiting not the audience and the teams and community that we try to serve. This is not, there are a lot of like camps and clinics and recruiting services that kind of feed on the poor athlete, or the athlete who's trying to make it, or the team that's trying to figure out how to like support. They charge their players to play. These are semi-pro amateur teams that are trying to figure out how to stay afloat and how to, live in the sports world. So we want to try to support them and give back to them and promote them, not take from them. So trying to find that balance between supporting our community, but also building a sustainable business model, I would say, is probably been the most interesting path, while also trying to grow at the same time and figure out, how we can cover more. I mean, the world is large. There are a ton of teams. How do we do it right and do it well? And then and also invest in our future. Like, what's the next thing that we should be working on? What's going to bring a deeper, richer experience to our audience? All these things I think about every day, and I try to move us forward, I guess, just 1 yard every day towards the goal where we want to be.
Is most of your editorial staff living overseas?
They're all, I would say, they're all overseas. They're not all. Some are Americans, but I think they're all overseas. Well, I mean, JC, one of our writers, lives in Canada, so I don't really call that overseas, but I think I'm actually the only currently living in the U.S. member of our team.
Gotcha. So I'm curious from like a fan standpoint or like a consumer standpoint, because when you say, that you played American football overseas and people kind of say, oh, wow, that's surprising, I didn't know. They kind of look at it as a novelty. But for some people, they hear about it and they just kind of go on about their day and they never really think about it again. So like, in terms of your business model, like, how do you kind of market your site with the product of American football overseas and keep people interested in it enough for them to keep coming back and wanting to learn more? Because like you said, you're covering the entire world, so there's a lot that they can really invest their time into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think right now we are first, based on kind of what we know our community and our audience is, we kind of are currently serving the very passionate international football fan who maybe has some extension, like a foot in the game, meaning they are already a coach or a player or did play, or their son or father or relative played overseas, and that was kind of their introduction to the game outside the U.S. Or we have a lot of media partners at bigger organizations that might share a story or retweet us or something that kind of gives us a little bit more attention. So, and then obviously try to optimize our social channels and our content that we put out, and make sure that the content we do produce, and this is my job, is making sure that the content our editorial team produces, that it gets out to as many places as possible. Without, you can obviously pay Google and WordPress and Facebook a ton of money to push whatever you want out to the world, but where's your return on investment there? And trying to figure all that out is really kind of what I've set up the site to be, where right now, because the site has been around for a while and it does have American football in the title of the business and of the domain, we tend to be highly ranked on Google. So when someone is searching anything about American football and another country, we tend to appear very highly in the ranking, in the results. And I credit this to, one, Google's algorithm, but two, our persistence in good content and regular content. We're putting out 5 to 6 original pieces a day, which is quite a churn, and we have quite a team doing this. And so I think all those things together really have gotten us where we are thus far. And it's been a very slow build. It's taken a while to figure a lot of this stuff out. Like I said, as not being a digital media professional and not knowing what the audience is. There's not like there's an existing business model necessarily that I could like plug and play here. So, the paid marketing that I have done is really around some of the larger events, AFI TV, really trying to build that audience and let people know that this new website that started last August is new, and it exists, and this is what the function of it is: to host and broadcast international live streams and aggregate them in one place so they're easy to find. And we also have the VOD library of these games on demand, so anyone can come back and look at them. But yeah, I would say that's kind of where our efforts have lied to ensure that what we're producing gets out to as many people as we can, and we can keep growing our audience. I mean, at the end of the day, if American football is still a niche product outside the United States, and I would still say 60% of our traffic is, I wouldn't say it's becoming more 50-50, but it is US based audience.
Mm.
So we're serving that kind of US based audience that's interested in the sport and like finds it almost as a novelty, or they have some kind of degree of relation to what's happening. And the other half is that player in Europe, that coach in Europe, that European audience that does read and know English. And that's where the rest of them are.
Now, is there like one country in particular that you really enjoy either covering or kind of learning more about the game and how it took root in that particular country?
It's so funny. There was an article that we work with this guy Kevin Seifert at ESPN did an article, and we did some consulting work for the CFL while they're putting together their CFL 2.0 initiative around what are the top 10 markets for international football outside of the United States and Canada. And this was based on, you can rank these things all types of ways. You can go purely by, registered members or the amount of clubs or, the level of football, but, or the potential population of the country versus how many people are already playing it. And, I would say you have three of the top countries outside of Canada and the U.S. I'm gonna remove them from the equation because they already have fully professional leagues in existence, and we don't concentrate necessarily on fully professional leagues. Are Mexico, Japan, and Germany, which seems like a strange three that I would say those are the three that are closest to being fully professional leagues. Austria is right there too. Austria has a much smaller population, but the football is really great, and they have the top four organizations, and especially the top two in Austria are like, I mean, the Vienna Vikings and the Sparta Raiders they have 5-camera TV productions. They have guys that are going straight to NFL pathway program out of there that have never played anywhere else but in Austria. Like, these are legit athletes that they're putting out, and great football that they're putting together. But going back to the other three, I mean, Mexico, they have a fully collegiate system that is on par with some of the U.S. schools, but they haven't been able to figure out how to get a true professional league going. They've been working on it, and there's been the LFA, which has kind of taken off a little bit, but it hasn't grabbed on the professional level in Mexico as much. Japan has a totally different system. They have fully sponsored teams where essentially you're an employee of the company if you play on their team. Like, you play for the IBM Big Blue, you actually work for IBM. It's incredible the system and the economy that they have set up around American football that's specific to Japan. It's so interesting. And that league has been around, and they have great football. They have a great college system there too.
Oh yeah.
And then you have Germany, where just there's 60,000 guys in Germany. There's 60,000 football players in Germany, that are playing football, on a semi-pro level, and over like hundreds and hundreds of clubs. And the pure volume and the pure energy behind the sport in Germany is really amazing, and the level of play really shows at the GFL. And they've done it all in a club system without a ton of money, and a lot of grassroots organization, a lot of really local passion that has produced some really, really great football. And it's been really amazing what they've been able to do without not like the NFL. The NFL is a franchise-based model, and it's almost like a communist socialist model. Well, the club model in Germany is more like the Premier League in the UK. It's a completely different system. So sorry, I keep making your questions my answers really long, but I would say those three countries are there's some really exciting potential there. But then you go to Brazil, and Brazil, just a country bursting with athletes that could play anywhere, but who knows? They keep trying to get leagues started up, and they fold, and then they're getting hit really bad by COVID. They haven't played football in 2 years in Brazil. But the amount of athletes and how sports crazy that culture is, it's the perfect market for American football.
Yeah, I mean, that's coming from Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, they're definitely a culture that embraces the physicality of sports too. I was listening to it's a coaching podcast called Run the Power, and they just had a coach from Brazil who had come and did, I think, an internship with at Baylor University, and then he went back to Brazil and is coaching college football now. And it's just amazing that you can see where the enthusiasm is there. And even the programs that don't have, shoulder pads and helmets and equipment, they play beach football, and they have championship circuits set up around that. And that's cool in and of itself. I would love to see some organized, maybe not a league, but some organized style play or tournament with just beach football. I think that's kind of the beauty about trying these games all around the world, where even if they don't have the resources to fully commit to football, they can find some variation that fits them.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you, if they did have the money to put behind a real game, the athletes are there, the passion is there. and the audience is probably there too. And it's just, maybe the magic confluence of events hasn't happened yet, or the right people haven't been in charge, or the right system and organization hasn't been, maintained yet. But I mean, the potential for it, to have football exported there and successful is very much alive.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is just time too, because it's like with Japan. I mean, football's been played there since like the 30s in some form or another.
Yeah.
So it's always like you kind of try to compare that. I'm not sure. Mexico, I think, was the early 1900s too. So it's always like you compare countries, but I guess a lot of it is just time and letting it pass on in some form generationally.
Yeah, and they've had the like you said, like those collegiate leagues are ancient. They're not like new systems. Like they've had these colleges have been playing football for a really long time, and they have very established systems that kind of work for what they have. Now, they might be also limiting themselves a little bit by those systems, but they've been protected, and like you said, time has allowed the game to be established to where it is so far. And not saying that every league needs to have every country needs to have an NFL. That's not like what I see. I don't see like there being global franchises of the NFL in every country in the world. I just think that, the world of American football, it is, America is in the name, but it goes back to the point I was saying earlier, is that like, there's nothing, there's nothing exclusive about talent and, about passion. And I think right now the world is larger than, and the internet does make it smaller, but there's a way that basically AFI wants to be the connective tissue, or that exporting and importing of the sport to other places.
Now, but to that point about like yeah, college programs and like professionalism, do you think if the game were to take off globally, that it would come in the form, maybe not professional football, but in some form of like postgraduate league? Or do you think that if it were to really expand all over, it would be through like universities kind of embracing the sport?
Yeah, I don't think there's one answer that's going to apply everywhere, because each country's kind of like, education systems and sporting systems are set up completely different. Like I said, like they don't have universities in other countries that, in most European countries, that can support. There's no sports program at like most colleges in Europe. You go to school, you go to college to like learn a trade or a profession or a skill, but you're not playing sports there. And the club system has kind of really dominated that. Not to say that, I mean, and that doesn't apply to every single situation. Like the Vienna Vikings has their own academy. There's a couple academies in the UK that have, and the UK has a university, kind of a small university program. I know that in Germany that there are high schools. Some of them are former or current United States Armed Forces schools that are in Germany, that they do have teams and they do play leagues. They do play each other, these teams that are high school or collegiate level. So, I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer to like how football is going to best grow, universally. But what I do know is that, there should be an opportunity for, whether you're a 14 or 15-year-old kid, in the Philippines, or you're in Brazil, or you're in Austria, or you're in Finland. Like, if you have the passion and the potential and the talent to go play football somewhere, you don't necessarily have to like go to a U.S. prep school or go to a U.S. college or get a scholarship and do that traditional route. There are academies and schools and university programs, or just club level programs, all over the world in all these different countries, and people aren't aware of them. So again, I think it goes back to us trying to be that connective tissue on promoting and supporting a lot of these teams' initiatives and programs that not only, a lot of them were designed to kind of to, like, I could speak in the Vienna Vikings circumstances where, that academy is for their club, like for their players, but they're not. It's not like they're turning away other guys who want to come learn football at their academy. No, I mean it's a great program with that you could move up internally in the program, or you can learn football and leave and go play somewhere else. And I think that economy is already started in Europe. That people, I see it every day because we follow these players and these coaches. They're moving around from team to team, season to season, country to country, and they're not just Americans or North Americans. They're Europeans that want that, that guy, a guy who's playing. He might be from the Czech Republic, but you know what? He can go play in Germany, and they'll give him an apartment and a salary, and when that season's over, he'll go to Spain, and then he'll go to Italy, and like he can play. People can almost play year round and jump around and play in these different leagues, and they don't have to be Americans. And I think that economy can apply to not just within Europe, but if you want to go to Australia, or if you're a Brazilian and you want to go play in Europe, or you're a Canadian, like there really is potential for a lot of cross-border movement by these guys, and they keep their athletic careers going. They learn more about football, and if their ultimate end goal is to get noticed by whether it's an NFL team or the new European League of Football, or the German Football League, which is the top levels outside that's currently playing. The way they're going to get noticed is by getting their film, getting seen online, getting media pushed out about them, and AFI covering them, and that's what we want to do.
Is there one particular market that you can one day see American football being the most popular sport in the country, specifically through participation? Obviously, you can measure that in different ways, but participation or even viewership.
You mean like a country where another sport is more dominant, and then American football could be more dominant?
Right.
Yeah, I mean obviously soccer is the world's most popular sport, and living in Europe, I experienced that firsthand. I don't necessarily think that I don't think there's I'm not saying there's a competition necessarily between America. In order for American football to succeed, other sports need to fail. I don't necessarily think that needs to happen. I think there needs to be more exposure to the game in places where the rules might be unfamiliar, and more members in the system. I mean, it would be really hard to say that American football is going to be more popular in Mexico or Germany than soccer is, because those are soccer crazy countries. I don't really see them overtaking them. I am a fan of Australian rules football and rugby, but I think those are contact sports, and they're very central to those cultures too. I mean, that's a really hard question to answer. I'm just going back and thinking through some of the countries where it could be more popular one day. It's interesting in the Scandinavian countries and in Finland. They're small countries, and their ice hockey is the number one sport in Finland. But you're talking about there's 5 million people in the entire country, so I don't know. And football actually has a pretty, if you were to weigh the amount of people versus the popularity of the sport, football is actually pretty high on the scale in Finland.
Okay.
I would say it might be the third most popular sport. It might be in the top 5 in Finland, which is actually pretty impressive.
Yeah.
For the sport. Yeah, that's a really tough question. I'd really have to think about that. Where would be the number, the top sport in that country?
Do you think, regardless of where it would happen, it would have to maybe not come from the success of someone going to the NFL from that country, but do you think that it would be someone that has that breakthrough that, say if someone came, from Mexico, that, grew up in Mexico, went to an American university and really became, maybe not a dominant player, but someone who is successful, someone who could become sort of like this pop culture icon in America, that do you think American football would rise, or the same thing from Japan or, Finland or anything like that? Do you think someone breaking into the NFL from that country would really kind of at least push it in the right direction towards that goal?
100%. I think that's what that's basically what the NFL's model, that's what the NBA's model was and still is, and that's kind of what has made the NBA such a global sport is the ability to kind of bring in so many international athletes to the NBA and then them bring the sport back to their country and increase the popularity of the NBA in those countries. And that's exactly what the NFL's model is currently, and that's what they're doing with the International Pathway Program, which is find international athletes that can compete at the NFL level and have those players be ambassadors for the NFL in those markets. I mean, there is one thing I like to be careful about is that the NFL, as dominant of a league it is, and as great as they are, and I'm an NFL fan, and I love what I love what I love the NFL, no questions asked. But what the NFL is doing is exporting the NFL. They're not exporting American football. And they might seem like one and the same sometimes. And they are, for the most part, when you watch, because that is the best product that you are going to see for a very long time in the future. The NFL is always going to be the top product of American football. So, and that's what should be shown in other places, because you want to see the best thing that's happening, and that is what's helping the sport grow in other places. However, the NFL, when the NFL goes to Germany and they put their games on TV, they're not sending money to Germany to make the game better there. They're not investing in youth programs. They're not giving the GFL money. There's no practical grassroots sports development being done by the NFL in those countries. They might be doing it as a pass through based on the media that they're putting out, but it's a very business decision, which it should be. I'm not disagreeing with it. I think one thing that, but back to your question about the players in these markets, is that I don't know if there's a critical mass point where there's enough international players where all of a sudden it's more popular in these countries, or if it's more of an exposure standpoint where if enough of these players become stars in the NFL and they're therefore, I'm trying to think of who's the most popular, there hasn't really been a Tony Parker or a Dirk Nowitzki or a Yao Ming, in the NFL yet. There have been great players that have been foreign players in the NFL. But there hasn't been there's no, Tom Brady is a red-blooded American. There hasn't been a Tom Brady who's from Germany, but there might be. And there's a guy from Germany who played at Texas Christian. There's lots of guys, who could be that guy, and maybe that's what it will take for there to be a tipping point or some kind of level where the sport really takes off and escalates it to the top of that country's kind of sporting list.
Mm-hmm.
I think the NBA has done a really good job doing that. They did it back in the 90s, and now the NBA is a ubiquitous brand and synonymous with basketball everywhere you go. Football does not look quite that way, in my opinion, because most of these international organizations that we deal with and we work with, they are huge NFL fans. They love the NFL, but they're not seeing the NFL in their country doing anything to help. I wouldn't say to help them, but to kind of to
give them the resources.
Yeah, give them resources, and I don't think that's necessarily the NFL's responsibility.
Right.
But and maybe that's because that tipping point hasn't happened yet with these players. Maybe the sport hasn't risen to the point where the local culture and economy and governments, have invested in the sport on a level because they haven't seen it as popular.
Yeah, I do kind of have that same thought. Like, is football really, and wherever the NFL is broadcasted, is football really registering with the audience, or is it just like the Americana of it? The same way that people like Marvel movies, or they like,
Yeah.
they do like basketball, but they also like, the players specifically. Like when I did a summer session at UCLA, and two of my roommates were from China, and they gave themselves American names, and one of them named himself Steph after Steph Curry. So to me, it just shows that I think it's the American pop culture that may draw the interest to the NFL, but maybe not completely to the sport of football.
Yeah.
They may like, it's kind of like the highlight culture you were talking about. They may like the highlight and the big hit, but not necessarily the complexity of the game. If
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think. Uh, yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think that's part of what the Americana of the sport. The flash and glam and the highlight thing. I mean, football is kind of built for that culture and that kind
Hmm.
of, that type of media, and the NFL and the NCAA and all. I mean, they do not shy away from it. I mean, that is fully embraced, and the game's rules and the media around the game have been developed in a way to optimize those features, and that definitely appeals to other people. I mean, I don't. As far as I can remember myself personally, like I've always been much more interested in the game because I played it and I was part of it. Like as a kid, my dad played it. Like I used to watch the Giants on Sundays with my grandpa when I was 5, 6 years old. So like it's always been a family experience that I always like wanted to know more and more about, and so that gave me a level of passion about the game itself. The more technical aspects of the game, and like play calling and being a critic. As the best fans are, we're also the best critics. And I don't know if that level of passion is like something that a fan you know gains over time, and that the more kind of casual Americana fan will never grasp onto.
Hmm.
And I think the bridge that the guys who are playing the game in other countries and coaching the game and supporting these teams, they are really building that base in those other countries, because those guys are already the most passionate NFL fans in those countries.
Hmm.
And that's because they know the ins and outs of the games, they know the technical aspects, they watch the NFL, and they admire great coaches and stuff like that. So you know I think that more casual Americana fan um, is a result of the more passionate fans.
Yeah, it seems to me like I think it still has to kind of go back to the success of a homegrown talent going on to play in the NFL, because I feel like when you cross that threshold, I think that's when you can really take a personal interest in it from that point.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, I mean, I watch a lot of Japanese football, and to me, like, I think realistically, you could have someone that goes into the NFL and plays like the role of like a Danny Woodhead, back when he was with the Patriots, or sort of like that scat back role in some sense. Which in today's game, you could certainly make a big impact that way. So I really think that sort of that bridge can be broken just from someone crossing that threshold, and then because even like when you look at now when you watch the game over in the UK, when the NFL goes over there, you see everybody dressed in different jerseys.
Right.
It's more of like a celebration, I guess, in a way, than actual interest in the product on the field.
Yeah, it's like a cultural event as opposed to just being like fans passionate about like their team. And but when you go to a Schwabish Hall Unicorns game or a Braunschweig New Yorker Lions game, like you might see some NFL jerseys in the crowd, but for the most part, you're seeing passionate, interested American football fans who know about their team, their German team, and they also probably know about all the NFL teams. It's not like your passions start for American football starts and stops, with a jersey or the team you favor. Like it kind of extends out into the universe of the sport. At least that's how I watch football. Like, I grew up as a little kid. I watched the Giants, but now it's taken me to to be interested in football, basically in every country in the world. And I'm not saying that's every fan, but you know, yeah, maybe some fans just watch their team on Sundays and that's it, and they turn off the TV. But I think the whole now 24-hour news cycle around sports and the superstars of the game. I watched a lot of football games Tom Brady was in because I was interested in seeing how he was going to do with the Bucks last year. Like, and I'm not a Bucks fan, and I think that's what the NFL counts on. And I think the same thing can apply to right now. Do you know who Moritz Böhringer is?
No.
He was back, I think it was 2016. He was drafted by the Vikings, straight out of a German team.
Okay.
He was drafted in the NFL draft in like the 5th round. I mean, kid had incredible numbers. They did like a little pro day and just drafted him based on those numbers. The first, I think, European to never played down a football in the U.S. and got drafted in the NFL draft. Anyway, he was with the Vikings, I think, for 2 seasons on a practice squad. Then was with the Bengals for a season. Never made it. I mean, he made it on the field, I think, in some preseason games or some, but never was never a guy on a team. Great athlete, great football player. But now he's back in Germany. He just went back and he's playing with the Schwäbisch Hall Unicorns this coming season. Their first game is on Friday. They play the Ravensburg Razorbacks on Friday, and it'll be his first game back in the GFL since 2015. But anyway, there's a story there behind this guy. He's a great athlete. He was good enough to be recognized by an NFL team, didn't make it. But a guy like that, that's a story that's going to pull people know him in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
They know he's now with this team in Germany. Are they going to tune in to watch that game on Friday on national TV in Germany? Maybe that does bring them to the TV to watch the game, and from there it's up to the teams and the league to put on a good product that people are going to want to return to watch. And I think that's the challenge now is like, okay, how do we put on a good product week after week to show that our game is good and you should tune in to watch it.
Doesn't the NFL have a program where they take athletes from like rugby or Australian rules football and put them through like this pipeline system where they teach them American football? And do you know anything about that?
Yeah, we've I'm good. I've become friends with Damani Leach and Will Bryce and Aiden Durd and I don't know OC Humanura personally, but I know he's kind of was in charge of that project originally. But mostly Will I've spoke with about, it's called the NFL's International Player Pathway Program, IPPP. And, they scour the globe for athletes because, they believe the same thing, that they don't think, they're not necessarily looking for a guy who has a ton of football experience, but if he's got the physicality and the physique and the intelligence to pick up the game, they see that as a way to bring the game to new places through these players. And that program has been around 4 or 5 years now. And every year, I think they find it's not a huge class. I think they scout, maybe they narrow a group down to 10 guys. Then they pick 5 of them, and then each year, one division of the NFL, one division is kind of selected, and each team, quote unquote, drafts one of these guys to their squad, and it doesn't count against the team's roster count or practice player count, and they get to keep the guy and kind of develop him for the season. And last year it was the NFC East. And they picked up Sandro Platzgummer, who was a running back for the Sparko Raiders, and he was there last year, and he's there this year again. And this year they got a guy from Sammy Reyes. He was a basketball player at Tulane. He's Chilean. But I mean, this guy is yoked. Like, you should see. I don't know if you've seen any photos of him, but like this guy looks like he he's jacked, and he's a tight end. Never played a down of football in his life, and now I can't remember which team he ended up signing. Oh, it was the Redskins. Well, not the Redskins, the Washington football team.
Yeah.
The Washington football team signed him to a contract before the draft, so he couldn't get drafted. That was a big story for us, and a good story for the NFL, that this guy's got an NFL contract and never played a down of football. But yeah, they've done. I think there's 5 players this year, and they're from like Mexico. There's a guy from Italy. There's a guy from Austria, tight end from Austria, and this tight end from Chile. I think it was the NFC West this year. Yeah, because it was the Rams. The Rams got Max Percher, who's an offensive lineman from Italy. I can't remember off the top of my head.
This sounds like it would be like a good almost reality show or like a YouTube show for the NFL. I'm kind of surprised they haven't done anything with that yet. Or maybe they have. I just haven't seen it, but I figured this would be a prime opportunity.
There's a couple video assets that I've seen. I think there's more that aren't released necessarily. I don't know if it's in that, I think it's a reality show format, but I know that these guys all live together in Florida and trained for this. And there is some stuff I've seen. I don't know how public it is or not, but yeah, that would be a really interesting story to see these guys from around the world come together, live in a house, train, and then get picked up by NFL teams.
Yeah. What's the most exotic location that you've seen American football played?
Exotic.
I mean, like I saw they had football like on the Ivory Coast. So is there anything that would surpass that?
Yeah, I know that. I mean, there's been a game in the Philippines years ago. There was a game in the Philippines, and like there was this. I don't know if you're familiar with IFAF. IFAF is technically the international federation that governs the sport, and before there was there was some controversy, and so they've had some kind of governing turmoil in the past decade. But prior to the 2014 World Championships, there was some international qualifying, and for the Asian representative, I think there was qualifying games happening between a team from Korea that went to the Philippines, I think, and like we covered it and we watched we saw some photos of the game, but it's just crazy to think right now that there was organized American football on an international level being played in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Neither of those teams end up making it to the World Championships, but it just I thought that was very interesting. I know that there's a lot of we end up being kind of I get reached out to by a lot of organizations looking for help on how to organize their their infrastructure. We've had people from Uganda and South Africa and Yemen and like places all over the world where like, I'm interested in American football and I live in this country. Like, is there an organization where I live, or can I start one and help me start an organization and register it with IFAF, or they are registered with IFAF, but they want more promotion or they want support, or that it's crazy the scope and amount of inquiries we get inbound from a lot of these international leagues. And I got my my Gmail. I get ridiculous amount of emails on AFI every day, my AFI Gmail. I have a tab where I tag each by country that I receive it from. So in case I want to go back and like find out, okay, who did I talk to from like Uganda, or who did I talk to from Tanzania, or who did I talk to from Pakistan? Like I can go, because like for the most part, I wish I had more bandwidth and I had better insight for a lot of these guys, but we are not the International Federation of Football of American football. So I can't offer a ton of resource. I can point them in the right direction, but I can't add a ton of support personally, besides like writing about them and giving them exposure, which we do oftentimes. Like you read about women's football in Morocco. Like where else would you have read that, if we didn't cover it?
That's got to give you a big sense of fulfillment, though, because I mean, you've always have, strived to expand football's global footprint, and then you have people that are contacting you about how do they get their own league started. And even though you're not organizing the leagues, you're pointing them in the right direction and giving that publicity. So I feel like you have to believe that what you're doing is actually making a difference the way you intended it to.
I think so. I wish I could do more. I wish we could help these teams in ways that they really need it. And like, sometimes it's fundraising, sometimes it's promotion, sometimes it's organization, but like again, our resources are limited as much as anyone else's, sometimes. And sometimes I wish, I think one day maybe we can be in a position to like do more with these things and take advantage of some of these circumstances where we can help these teams and these administrators or these other passionate American football fans in these places that are more exotic. I would love to, do something in Africa or do something in, the Middle East or Southeast Asia or, Russia, South America, even. Like there's a lot of emerging markets that like there are great athletes, there is passionate American football fans, but maybe their density and volume isn't to the point where it makes sense to really invest, there yet. And but that who's to say that there won't be one day,
Yeah. Now, like for the future of AFI and trying to expand international football's presence in the U.S., like what are some of the next steps that you want to take to continue that mission? What do you have on your laundry list that you want to take care of and expand on?
So we're really close to launching basically a new website, which I've been working on for quite some time. That has a more I don't want to call it a platform, but there's more. There'll be a lot more depth of coverage where, to date AFI has really been mostly a news magazine. It's kind of, when someone visits our website, they read an article and then they leave. And that's not a horrible thing. It's just, I feel like there's a much richer experience that we could provide. But obviously to do that, you need to invest in design and technology to do that. And up to this point, we hadn't been able to do that. But, it's been a long project, probably over the last 18 months where, we've built a new website and we're going to launch hopefully in the next couple months. I would like to do it within the next month. That will provide a much richer experience for our audience and our users, but still be familiar in a way that people recognize AFI now. So that's kind of the biggest project that's not launched yet. Beyond that, what takes up a lot of my time is AFI TV and really kind of getting that going. Like I said, we just started that last August. We're onboarding new leagues and new teams. We just onboarded the GFL, which is starting on Friday. They have 14 teams in the GFL, and there's they play through October. So there's quite a few games. There's something like 80 regular season games this year. So to get the infrastructure set up for that, where we can, have AFI TV, AFI.TV as our live stream site that's going to be able to support and broadcast out those 80 games for the GFL on top of the agreements and broadcasting that we're doing for Austria, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, which are all leagues that either haven't started yet or will be starting shortly. There's a lot going on there to kind of keep that coordinated and build our user base up, which is just past 10,000 registered users on AFI TV, and we're really excited because I think that's a really important part of growing the sport, is providing access and to those live streams, because that is the product, and the consumer and the market is going to ultimately judge what they want to watch and what they're going to see, and I think that a lot of these teams are putting together really great products, really great teams and games, and there's some great interesting footage and highlights, and they're doing some really great productions. And why not try to get those productions in front of the largest possible audience you can get them? And we're figuring out ways where we can make that that live streaming model sustainable, and to bring more advertising dollars that to those streams, to show the teams that, listen, there is a revenue model around your live streams. If we can get 10,000 people watching your game on AFI TV, and that's just now, like, if we can get these guys watching your games and you put together a good product, and there's an American company or any international company that's interested in sponsorship or ad placement or display ads or even physical advertising around these games, there's an audience there. I mean, that's what advertising is, and that's how the NFL is a $1 billion business, is because they have millions and millions of people watching, having their eyeballs on those games and on their players, and there's really big money there. And not saying that money's the end all be all, but money is what makes the NFL so popular, and will be able to support the infrastructure that a lot of these international teams need to not only survive but to grow. So we want to partner with these teams and these clubs and players and coaches around the world, so that the best product is out there, and that we can show off all the great work that these international teams and players and coaches are doing, because there is a lot of great football out there. People just need to know it's out there.
Do you have any ideas or plans to launch like an app for like Fire Stick TV or Apple TV to watch, like AFI TV to watch these on Fire Stick or anything like that?
Yeah, I know. So right now, our technology partner, there's Chromecast enabled. I have to ask about that. That basically, I don't have Fire Stick or Amazon Fire. It's something basically that allows us to broadcast inside of Amazon, correct?
Yeah, basically you download the app and then you can just access it directly from there, and then you can watch it. And I have a Fire Stick, so I plug it into the back of my TV, and so I can watch it from my television. But obviously, you can just go on the website and download the app, and you can watch it from there.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to ask our technology team and get that on the list of the developers list of seeing how we can be Fire Stick enabled for that too. Because yeah, I mean, the idea is to kind of be as accessible to anyone, and whether we obviously crouching over your phone, I mean, or your laptop isn't the best way of football experience all the time. So yeah, we want to make sure that we can get people to watch as many games as we, in the best format that we can do it. It's funny sometimes. We have. I think this Saturday we'll have 4 games going at once, and so like I have 2 laptops. I'll have two laptops open, and then I'll be casting the other one on my TV and try to like watch as much football as I can. It's fun, but it could be hectic too.
Yeah, it's like watching like international football for Red Zone.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think there'd be a lot of opportunities, man. I mean, even like doing games, like I know USA Football every few years has like championship games between like Team Japan and Team USA. They have like that, so that might even be an avenue down the road too.
Yeah, USA Football. Yeah, they were doing they do it in Texas every year. They do an international bowl kind of like tourney where, they have they put together a world team, and I think Canada had their own. I think it was like Team Canada, Team USA, and there was like a world team, and they do a little kind of scrimmage series, and a lot of that was IFAF sponsored, which and and USA Football sponsored, and actually that USA Football money came from the NFL because the NFL
is a partner with them.
Yeah, because the USA Football is technically a nonprofit. They accept funding through the NFL used to fund. They don't do so much anymore, actually. The NFL used to fund a lot of those events through USA Football. And then USA Football would be able to put on events like that. So it was separate from the NFL. And USA Football is technically the United States' governing body of American football. Surprisingly, it's not the NFL. But because it has to be technically a nonprofit organization, and the NFL is not a nonprofit.
Yeah, right. The irony.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, do you want to tell people where they can find AFI on social media so they can follow and get updates on what games are being played and when new articles are posted?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow us on Instagram at AFI_review, on Twitter at AFI_review. That's kind of where we're most active. Obviously, we're on Facebook. American Football International on Facebook is probably one of our most popular international channels, social channels. And then the website, that is the business at the end of the day, is www or AmericanFootballInternational.com. And then AFI TV. I mean, all of our articles about the games on AmericanFootballInternational.com and on our social media channels will link to AFI.TV. AFI.TV is specifically our live streaming platform that you can go and watch. I think we have 8 games this weekend. And we're probably going to have at least 8 games every weekend for the entire summer. We have the GFL is super exciting. That's the big league that's starting up, and we're really happy to partner with them on getting their 14-team league out to as many teams as viewers as possible. And then shortly after that, we have Finland starting. Finland has always been, they punch above their weight, and they always put on great. I think it's a 6-team league this year. I played in Finland. I might be a little partial to it. It's surprisingly good football. I don't want to say surprisingly, but it is good football, and they have great international players that go play in Finland. They have a lot of really great local players. That league is really fun to watch. And then, unfortunately, France's season was canceled. That's where I played in France too. They were not over COVID. Their league usually starts in January and February, and they just weren't able to get something going because COVID was still affecting the country so badly. But Germany and the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Denmark, Finland will have a lot of football on this summer. So come to AFI.TV and AmericanFootballInternational.com to watch those.
Cool, man. Dude, I'm glad you came on the show. I had a great time talking to you. I'm really optimistic about what you guys are doing. And hopefully we can see football really take off in the coming years around the world.
Aaron, I appreciate it. I mean, it's always fun to talk to someone who's interested in it and kind of take a deep dive and